being actionable is really a very concrete desire, and to inform the manifesto with actionable and really future proof and forward-looking stimuli, so that that chapter 9 can really become a trace of policy recommendations. We asked, and thank you very much for making this effort, to our participants to identify keywords from this chapter 9. So we're going to introduce this session with Professor Little, who is really one of the most important voices in terms of system thinking, and we know how important that is. And we will listen to what he has to say and recommend. Everyone is asked, not only invited, but almost obliged, to be very active listeners, to take notes, because after a first round with our youth organizations and some very meaningful experts, we will then do a second round, and that's where we're going to try and come up with true proposals and policy recommendations. So everyone's going to be in this together, okay? So I don't know if, okay, for those who might have a easier time in their native language, please scan that QR code. And I don't know if John Little is already with us, but I will briefly present him. He's really an expert on process dynamics and in environmental systems, and he is really honed into Anthropocene systems, deeply combining culture, technology, and the environment. And his research is in this interlinked codependency of these timelines. We know that we can't think in silos anymore, we can't act in silos, and that's why the experience of people who've really been moving, pushing these breaking of boundaries is vital. His invaluable expertise has also contributed to the evolution of RSF, and get ready to, when we have him, yes we do, to take note and listen to what he has to say. Professor Little, the floor is yours. You're tiny up there. Sorry. I see you though.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet, but I'm sure they're coming up. Yes, I'm getting many thumbs up, so yes.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's the most important thing, that you can see the slides.
Okay, great, and listen to you, so we're doing both.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. So I imagine you all sort of have the idea that we're going to try and go from the regenerative business to the regenerative society. And what we'd like to do is take a systemic approach. So I think you may be familiar with this framework. So this is regenerative business using indicators. And so here we have circularity, natural capital, climate, education, and well-being. And we can assign values like this to all these indicators, and then we can plot it visually and get a sense of how well we're doing. And so then this morning, I believe you've been engaging in various topics like shown on the right over here. And with these, what you're doing is like adding sort of more specific societal challenges like energy and food and transportation and cities. But in addition, you're increasing the degree of complexity. So what we're trying to do now is move to a regenerative society. And in a way, you can see that's already happening here. But there is another nice example of this, and this is the evolving donut. So in this evolving donut, if you're outside the donut here, then these are the planetary boundaries. Maybe you've heard of those. And then inside here, these are sort of the human requirements. And the idea is that if you're outside, then the overshoot is shown in red. And if you're inside here, then the shortfall is shown in red. So if you eliminate all the red from this figure here on the right, then what you end up is with this like regenerative society. And but of course, this is still everything is still done in indicators. But I imagine you can see that all of these human and ecological sort of criteria are interconnected. So then here's the group that's developed this planetary boundaries framework. And in this 2023 paper, they confirm that these planetary boundaries are interdependent. So that means they're all interconnected. You can't address just one and ignore the others. And they also confirm that we need to take a systemic approach, even though they don't have one yet. So then another nice framework is this One Health framework. So then if we want to have a kind of a planetary scale, healthy society with healthy humans, healthy animals, and healthy ecosystems, what we're going to have to do is to, first of all, get a kind of a planetary scale overview of all the sectors and disciplines involved. And then we're going to have a sort of like an understanding of the various social systems going from the various scales like global, regional, national, and local, and including urban, the urban scale. But then in order to put all of this together, what we really most, definitely need to do is, first of all, communicate with a lot of different people, and then coordinate what we're doing with a lot of different people around the world at different scales, and then build capacity, and then finally, then we'll be able to collaborate. So with all of this in mind, we can go back to this regenerative society sort of indicator framework, and we can say to ourselves, well, okay, if we're wanting to take a systemic approach, then what do we need? So then, so from what I've just described, we have, sort of a planetary scale problem, and there's profound complexity and uncertainty associated with that. And we've got multiple societal challenges that are interdependent. We've got multiple systems, sectors, and disciplines involved. We've got multiple spatial and temporal scales going from the planetary to the local scale. And then in addition, we have to communicate, coordinate, build capacity, and collaborate. So this is a massively complex sort of challenge. And given these sort of abstract characteristics, we can say that what we need to do this is, first of all, a causally coherent theoretical basis. And we can think of evolution as that basis. And then we also need a common language, a common scientific language, and a common computational framework, as well as a coherent decision support system and a pedagogy to train everyone how to use this thing. And so what I'm going to do very briefly today is give you an overview of this sort of evolutionary perspective, and then show how it connects with all these other criteria. So maybe you should buckle your seatbelts, but here we start with billions of humans transformed Earth systems into Anthropocene systems. And it's the most amazing story. So here we have 12,000 years ago, we had 4 million people on Earth, and now we have 8 billion people on Earth. And perhaps you know this like evolutionary story, but we start here 13.8 billion years ago with the universe, and we move through until today. And what I'm going to do now is just blast through each of these evolutionary periods and give you a quick sort of idea of how we got to be like we are. So here we have the universe forming, and then 4.5 billion years ago, we get the Earth forming, and geological evolution leads to the various geophysical systems. So then we have 3.6 billion years ago, we have the emergence of life. We get the first cell, and genetic evolution is sort of unleashed, and we get these unicellular ecosystems. So then only 650 million years ago, we get multicellular organisms, and these lead to plants, fungi, and animals. And then animals have cognitive systems, we all do, and they have the nervous system and the associated brain. So then only 6 million years ago, the early humans separated from the primates, which were the chimpanzees. Maybe you know the Jane Goodall story. And that led to hunter-gatherers on the plains of Africa. And then human cooperation and competition amongst those hunter-gatherers was facilitated by cultural evolution, which is separate to genetic evolution. And that includes technological evolution, which is sort of like our tools, and also the socially adapted human brain. So then 12,000 years ago, some of these hunter-gatherer groups started to settle in little villages, and they started to domesticate crops and animals, and this gave rise to these zoonotic diseases. And then 5,000 years ago, some of these villages became towns and cities with socio-cultural and socio-technical specializations, enabling more complex urban societies to emerge. So then 270 years ago, maybe this is the more familiar story, industrialization and steam engines resulted in increased use of fossil fuel, accelerating transportation, communication, economic systems, and the rapid development of mining and energy systems. So then finally, computerization computerization came about 70 years ago, and that enhances cultural and technological evolution. Everything goes faster and enables the emergence of computational science, digitization, and social media. But the important point is that these Anthropocene systems became increasingly complex and interconnected, with transportation, energy, communication, economic, and other socio-cultural systems forming a globally connected system of systems. So what that looks like is shown here. We have one big, gigantic, planetary scale, globally connected meta ecosystem. And we have geophysical systems, which are the geological, ocean, hydrological, atmosphere, and climate. And then we have the biophysical systems, which are a combination of biological and geophysical systems. So these are our ecosystems. And then the sociocultural and socio-technical systems, these are sort of our human systems, and these evolve directly from these ecosystems. And examples of these various systems are shown here. So what we have then is one coherent evolutionary sort of continuum that gives rise to all these Anthropocene systems. So then to briefly show you how it all fits together, here we have our sort of like the problem statement, and then these are our required characteristics of how we're going to do this. And first of all, we need this causally coherent theoretical basis. And here we have our Anthropocene systems, which all co-evolved and continue to co-evolve as we speak. And then we need a common ontology or scientific language, so we can have models of these various systems, and these would be represented in this common ontology. We also need a common computational framework. So here we have our system of systems framework with these models represented in this common sort of language. And then in addition, we need this coherent decision support system, because we're going to have to be able to engage with stakeholders and use input from those stakeholders to help us address these complex challenges. And then finally, we need this pedagogy so that everyone involved can learn what's needed to be done. So we actually have something like this that we're working on. So we've got this project that's based on the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So there's this huge watershed on the east coast of the US, 5 states involved. And there's agriculture that takes place throughout this watershed, and that drains into this bay and causes dead zones in the bay. So we've got eutrophication of the bay, agricultural impacts in the watershed, and regional economic growth. And these are our 3 interdependent societal challenges. And then we have these systems, the land use system, the watershed system, the economic system, and the estuary system. And we put these into our computational framework. And so in this way, we can try and address these particular societal challenges in an integrative way. And where we're kind of going now is, once we've shown that can work here for the Chesapeake Bay watershed, and we can kind of go from the regional scale to the urban scale, we can kind of zoom into Baltimore, for example, at the urban scale. Once we've shown that can work for these societal challenges and these systems, then we can start to add other societal challenges and other systems as needed. And in addition, we can take this entire sort of framework and apply it to other regions, like the Colorado River Basin and the Columbia River Basin. And indeed, we can apply it to other parts of the world, like Europe and Asia. And in this way, we can kind of coordinate what we're doing, collectively. So even though I realize this is like a lot, to digest in a short space of time, I hope I've sort of convinced you that we can go from the regenerative business to the regenerative society using a systemic approach. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You are we left. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, good. Though we're over time, I just have, because the purpose of this session is with youth-led organizations to kind of inform the manifesto of what their policy recommendations would be. So if we were to take, aside from the multiple exponential scale of complexities, Do we take home, or do you recommend that we take home working and experimenting on all those complexities, but at a very specific scale of one area? Like, could it be a municipality or a community, so that you can really get all those forces to come together?
Yes. So in fact, one of the sort of criterion would be to take an agile approach. So we definitely would not want to start with everything. This would be impossible. So what you have to do is sort of start small, but the methodology that you use needs to be sort of extensible and scalable. And that's exactly what this computational framework does for us. So if you can start small and then build up from there, but then as long as the framework you're using can be built on, then you're sort of in good shape.
So start small with all the voices possible, right? As many.
That's the right idea.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, no problem.
Nice to meet you, though, at a distance. Thank you.
No problem.